full disclosure, I have not yet read the book. There are a lot of times when you watch television interviews and the host goes, I absolutely love your book, and they haven't read it. Somebody wrote questions and they were handed the book as a prop. I am going to read this, but yesterday when flying back to town, I emailed our great staff here and said, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. If Ian O'Connor is writing this book on Aaron Rodgers, we need to have him on. And bam, here he is. Wow, Ian O'Connor. Out of the Darkness, the mystery of Aaron Rodgers, the man who brought you Belichick, among other great New York Times bestsellers. Ian, how are you?
Andrew, I'm a very big fan of your work. I'm very happy to be on with you. Thanks for the kind words.
Well, thank you, and the feeling is mutual clearly here. This has been a bit of a journey to write this book, Ian. Aaron knew, tell us the story here. Aaron knew you were writing it, but didn't want to sit down with you until the very end. Tell me that.
I don't know if that's 100% accurate. I suspect it is. But I made a lot of requests before a sit down with him, obviously, through the Jets, through his agent. I directly reached out to Aaron. I sent him books I had written in the past on Belichick and Coach K, and never really got any response, yes or no. And I actually handed in a manuscript in January without him and assumed that he was not going to cooperate. And frankly, he doesn't owe me anything. And so that's fine. I've done books before with no cooperation. And then in February, I get a message from the Jets that he's now willing to see me. So I had to reopen the book, and I flew out to Malibu to sit down with him, had a bomb scare on the flight, ended up in Chicago, diverted for 8 hours, but survived that. And the 2 hours with him was, they were more than worth it. And he made the book better without question. It was really more of a fact-checking process at the end of all my interviews and talking to his friends, his family members, his parents. His brothers did not talk to me, but I did talk to a lot of people very close to him. And I think he wanted to know, what did you hear? And what do I need to counter or put into context? And it was an enjoyable give and take. And again, he made the book better, and he did not owe me that sit down at all. And I appreciate it.
And I saw him on camera this morning talking to Boomer Esiason, where he said that he actually, Ian, learned things about his family from you, specifically the first chapter here where you tell the story of his grandfather, Edward Rodgers, prisoner of war, served our country in Europe, and he learned things about his grandfather that he had not been told by his family.
Yeah, actually, Aaron's father said that as well about his own father. And the military documents, there's a gentleman named Dan Matthews in Minnesota who's an incredible expert in military records, and he uncovered a lot of this. And Edward Rodgers was an amazing combat pilot in World War II. He flew 44 missions, which is more than double the average lifespan of a combat pilot in World War II in the European theater against Hitler's war machine. And he really was amazing. On St. Patrick's Day in 1944, his plane's on fire, his plane is bullet-ridden, and his squadron peels off because that was protocol. And they were on to the next stage of the mission. And he said, I was all alone over Germany. It was the loneliest feeling in the world. And somehow with 10 men aboard, he got that plane safely back to the American base in Italy. So he was a hero without question, shot down on the 44th mission, beaten when he was captured, mistreated as a POW, gave a war crimes interview with a lot of detail. So I printed out that interview and sent it to Aaron, and I think he appreciated that. And yeah, but I told him, I don't want you to read about some of the disturbing details of his war experience first in this book. I want you to see it from me before you get the book, because it's your grandfather. And so, yeah, that was my favorite chapter, because I got a chance to write about one of the greatest members of the greatest generation. And anytime as a writer you get that opportunity, you take it.
And anyone who just saw Masters of the Air on Apple, I think, can appreciate the stories of that greatest generation and our airmen over Europe. And yes, we'll greatly appreciate that first chapter, which I was trying to read here on the way to work. How did Aaron deal with the other family stuff, the mom and dad and the not talking and the relationships and all of that?
Yeah, that was the most tense part of the conversation I had with him. And the one thing I really appreciated is the fact that he understood that as a biographer, I had to cover this. That if I was writing the story of his life, the fact that he hasn't talked to his parents and his two brothers in almost 10 years, that had to be covered. And there are athletes, I think you would agree with this, who wouldn't understand that. Why not just write about my career? So that helped. And it's the estrangement has gone on for far too long. And there's a lot of he said in it. It's sort of death by a thousand cuts as opposed to one particular development that unfolded that caused the estrangement. It's very complicated, and as most family divisions are. But he was candid about it. There were some things he wouldn't talk about, but he did address some things about that division and estrangement on the record. And the parents and other family members, some blame Olivia Munn for much of this. I don't in my book because I think Aaron entered that relationship with feelings that maybe she notarized. But at the end of the day, he hasn't dated her in 7 years and he's still carrying on this estrangement. So it's not all her fault at all. And so, listen, there's a scene in the book that I was very happy to nail down and get on the record from both Aaron and his father. They hugged last year at the Lake Tahoe Celebrity Golf Tournament. And Ed Rodgers told me he hadn't seen or spoken to his son in almost 9 years. And when he turned and 15 feet away is his middle child staring at him, he said, I froze because I forgot what it felt like to have my son in my presence. And they hugged, they cried, or at least Ed did. Aaron had to go back to play the rest of his golf round. But that moment is a very emotional scene in the book, and both talked about it and said it meant a lot to each of them. And hopefully it's the first baby step towards reconciliation, and I think it will be.
Ian O'Connor's book is Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. So after they hugged, he just went back to playing golf, and they never, Ian, reconnected in Tahoe?
They didn't reconnect in Tahoe, and I just think this is one thing. It's going to take Aaron even maybe more time. I don't know. He's trying to figure out a way to kill this thing off. And it's just easier to let it live and let it linger than to confront this living organism that is the estrangement and put an end to it. And I do think there might have been some electronic communication in recent months, brief, but hey, that's something. And I think that the road to a reunification of the family is going to run through the father. His father is his idol, was his idol in college. When he gave an interview at Cal Berkeley, Aaron talked about looking up to Joe Montana and Steve Young as a kid. That's who he wanted to be. But he said, really, my idol is my father. That's who I want to be. And Ed Rodgers was his first coach. He taught him how to play football and was with him all the way and his biggest fan. So I think clearly if there is a reconciliation, it will go through the father. It'll happen hopefully in the coming months. And then organically, the rest of the family will fall back into place.
It's just fascinating. I can't imagine. Listen, we all have issues with our family here, and some people do speak to their family, and some people don't ever want to be in the same room. And I'm not just talking Thanksgiving dinner, but just in general. I know people who can't fathom being in the same room with their family ever again. They're gone. But the idea of seeing my father for the first time, or a family member, anyone with whom I'm estranged, knowing they are there, having that moment, and then just leaving again. I personally, I can't wrap my head around that. Like, you're there. Like, they're right there. Get it over with. But
it's true. He was competing in a tournament.
I understand
which
that.
I think he finished ahead of Annika Sorenstam in that tournament.
Which is amazing. But eventually you get back to the clubhouse and you sign your scorecard, and someone offers you a beer. And but my dad's somewhere here. Anyway, that's...
Yeah, you're right. And frankly, that's a question I should have asked him and did not. But I think he struggled with this. I think deep down, Aaron realizes that this has gone on 5, 6, 7 years too long. Mm-hmm. And his friend, Jordan Russell, his best friend, who also was exiled from his life for about 3 years or so. And then Aaron took him back in. He doesn't take many people back in, but Jordan Russell was one of them. And Jordan's question, I think he raised to Aaron, but he also did to me. He said, does the punishment here fit the crime? And it doesn't. So I think Aaron is really good at a lot of things, and he's one of the greatest ever at football. But trying to end this, he's not so good at that. And I think your example of not following up at the golf tournament is a great example of that.
There's obviously Olivia Munn headlines that everyone's going to pick up, and you get deeper into this than anyone has been able to get. There's also the I have been immunized thing here. I don't know, Ian. It wasn't I was wrong, but he did kind of pull back the curtain on. Was there a little bit of regret there whatsoever in how he handled it?
Yeah, I think so, because the way I positioned it, Andrew, when I brought that up was I said, listen, I can't guarantee this because I was not sitting in the room in August of 2021 when you said this. But if I were a columnist in Green Bay or Milwaukee sitting there, vaccinated, and you told your truth, and his truth was he was allergic to an ingredient in Pfizer and Moderna, and he was concerned about Johnson and Johnson's side effects. And if you had said that, I would have found that to be a somewhat reasonable position. I really don't think I would have ripped you that day in a column.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you would have faced less than half the criticism you did when in November it was discovered that you were not vaccinated and you tested positive for COVID. So I think he agreed with that. And he said, if I could do it over again, I would tell the truth. I would say, I had these health concerns about the vaccines and I'm not getting vaccinated. And I just think the truth is always the best option. And he did concede that that was the best approach and that he wishes he had done that in August of 21.
It's really interesting with him because, like, I've interviewed him over the years and I think we have a decent relationship. I saw him at Santa Anita last year for the Breeders' Cup, very, very briefly here. Never had, never more than just like a 6-7 minute TV interview or seeing people at Super Bowl parties. I think Aaron has a little bit this need to kind of prove that when he's getting questions from reporters that, like, I'm a little smarter than you. Like, I want to test you to see if you really know what you're talking about. And if you push back on him, right, if you meet him at his level, then he enjoys that. And then maybe there's more of a connection. And I think that I'm immunized. And yes, he was trying to avoid it and he was trying to get away with it. But I think there was a little bit of, hey, like, I'm smarter than you. Are you smart enough to figure out what it is, how I'm playing this kind of thing? Like, I'm going to get one over on you guys and you're not going to notice. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I would say, Andrew, how did that work out for him?
It didn't work out well.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because he said his strategy was if they're smart enough to ask the follow-up question,
right,
which is, does that mean you're vaccinated? He would have then told his truth. Well, it caused, frankly, I don't think he's recovered from that moment. At least his image hasn't, because before that, he was one of the good guys in the NFL. He was socially aware. He backed Colin Kaepernick. He backed protesting athletes. There was a fan at a game who yelled out an anti-Muslim slur during the national anthem, and he rebuked that fan and was thanked by President Obama for doing that. And those things meant something to Aaron Rodgers. And so he was looked as one of the good guys. And then all of a sudden, yeah, I've been immunized. Those 4 words change everything, becomes a villain. He adds on to it with conspiracy theories, the Jimmy Kimmel thing. And now he's in a place where, listen, we all know it shouldn't be this way, but victory sometimes equals virtue. I think if he does happen to win a Super Bowl with the Jets, improbable as that might be, that a lot of the on the field and off the field unforced errors go away. And I think deep down he probably knows that.
And I really can't wait to read it. One last thing here. I know this is hard. Is there one big surprise, like one thing you learned about him in this journey where you go, I didn't see that coming?
I just think his teammates universally, almost to a man, outside of maybe a couple, love him.
Yeah.
And that's never talked about. Is like the people who spend the most time with him see him as a great teammate, a great leader. Again, a couple of exceptions, but it's been a long career, a couple of decades. And I think that's underreported, under talked about, underappreciated, under everything, because those guys know And to a man, and it's unbelievable what I saw with the Jets last year and even this year, the way they look at him, the way they talk about him, and the vast majority of his teammates in Green Bay, the same thing. And that really needs to count for something. And I don't think it does in the public discussion of who Aaron Rodgers is.
And that love and that mutual respect, has the potential, if, they could block for him here, to maybe write an interesting story here this year for that team. I hope it happens just for the sake of the story. I mean, it'd be amazing. And I remember when he got hurt last year, week 1, I was doing the postgame show on NFL Network that night. Like the collective disappointment of everybody. I felt for Jets fans, but the entire league had this, oh no, because everybody wanted to see it. They wanted to see how the story ended. The circumstances have changed, but we get that chance to do it this year. Again, the book by Ian O'Connor is Out of the Darkness, The Mystery of Aaron Rodgers. Ian, when can we get it? I know this is an advance copy. Is it out yet?
It's on Amazon.com now for pre-order. It's officially released next Tuesday.
Awesome. Ian, like I said, looking forward to it. Thanks for taking the time. I know you're busy with doing a bunch of these. Best of luck to you, sir.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.
You got it.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.